Hispanics are rallying to our cause for a simple reason, because you love America and you believe in America, and you know that the time has come to stand up and defend America and everything it stands for.
Former President Trump speaking in Miami this afternoon at the Hispanic Leadership Conference. The latest government census showed the Latino population in the U.S. has grown from 50.5 million in 2010 to 62.1 million in 2020. And the number of Latinos registering to vote and heading to the polls is also going up. CBS News correspondent Enrique Acevedo is covering the event in Miami. What's your big takeaway from what you saw and what you heard, Enrique?
Well, Scott, former President Trump was warmly embraced by a group of Latino conservative leaders like Abraham Enriquez, the young founder of an organization called Bienvenido, who referred to former President Trump as the first Latino president in U.S. history. We also heard from the CEO of Goya Foods, Alberto Unane, who called the FBI, the Justice Department, the secret police, and then introduced President Trump as the GOAT, the greatest president of all time. So a warm embrace from the conservative leaders in that room, and from a crowd here in downtown Miami that is supportive of America First policies and the idea of President Trump running for president again.
We have some numbers, I think, showing the share of the Latino vote the former president won in 2016 and 2020. As we alluded to, it didn't just increase, it increased dramatically. So the question is that trajectory continuing? Are Republicans making similar gains? And if the former president ran again, would that share increase? Based on your reporting, is that a continuing trend or one that stopped in 2020?
So that's an interesting question. Like you say, we saw that increase from 2016 to 2020. Here in Florida, President Trump in 2016 got around 34% of the Latino vote. 2020, a different story, 45%, which is a record turnout among Latino voters for a Republican candidate. That trend, I think, has continued. If you look at voter registration numbers in the state of Florida, Republicans were trailing Democrats in 2020. Now they're ahead by a comfortable margin. I think the last number was around 112,000 more Republican voters registered in the state to vote. When you look at Hispanics specifically, the advantage that Democrats had in places like South Florida, here in Miami-Dade County, in Broward, that has also decreased in the last couple of years, with more Republican Latino voters joining the ranks. So I think it's going to be interesting now in November to see how some of those candidates, Republican candidates, perform in districts like Florida 25, 27. Going back to District 25, the two largest cities in that district, the case of Hialeah and Doral. In 2016, President Trump lost in Doral by more than 40% or around 40% against Hillary Clinton. In 2020, Scott, he won that city by 2%. An incredible turnaround if you think of how, the comfortable margin that Hillary Clinton won by in 2016.
So many big state and federal elections in Florida this year. Do you get the sense, you're watching the ads and talking to your sources, that this is the primary focus of candidates to win over this block of voters?
Well, I think they're making a difference not just in the traditional states like California and Arizona, here in Florida. The Latino vote in places like the Carolinas, in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in other states like Nevada. It might not be the largest portion of the electorate, but that 3-4% in a very close election like the one we saw in 2020 makes a big difference. So I think that's why more candidates are paying attention, are investing in the Latino community, are engaging with the Latino community, because one of the most, unfounded myths about the Latino voter is that they're not enthusiastic about the political process, they're not engaged. And I think candidates from both parties are starting to realize that Latinos will be engaged to the extent that the process engages with them.
It's worth noting, as we show these numbers, as it relates to congressional races, there is that Senate race, oh, by the way, and all of these competitive U.S. House races. Which are the ones you're watching closest?
Well, the case of Maria Elvira Salazar in that competitive district, Florida 25th, I think she won by a very narrow margin. No one expected her to take that district from Democrats, and she did. So she did that on the shoulders of the Venezuelan American community, mainly a constituency that has now been very supportive of Republican candidates. That's interesting, Scott, because when people try to explain the Latino vote, or what we call the Latino vote here in Florida, they always talk about Cuban Americans. Well, Cuban Americans are now not the majority of Latino voters, at least in the case of South Florida. We see other voters coming from places like Colombia. There are over 1.5 million Colombians now here in Florida, half of them eligible voters. We see voters from Venezuela, like I was saying. So it's probably the most diverse Latino vote in the entire country here in Florida, and that is helping the state become even more conservative, which I think it's fascinating when you think about it.
Beautiful view there in Miami. Enrique Acevedo, thank you very much.